Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Roddey, and welcome to the best of Allegheny County. The focus of our show is to introduce you to successful people who have a personal connection to Allegheny County. And the show is presented by St. Barnabas, which has been caring for people in southwestern Pennsylvania since 1900. Today in Allegheny, Beaver, and Butler counties, we offer the full continuum of care, including independent living, living assistance, skilled care, memory care, home care. We have a standing medical center, and a whole lot more. Today, we are going to have a very special show. We're going to take a little different direction this week. Over the last few weeks, we've interviewed people from a wide range of topics, from dog shows to sports agents. But today's topic is going to be a little more serious. We're going to discuss the coronavirus. And, of course, we've all been hearing about all of the problems going on around the world. But today we're going to hear from a real expert. I'm proud to introduce our first guest, Dr. Donald Burke, Distinguished Professor of Epidemiology, former Dean of the Graduate School of Public Health at the University of Pittsburgh, and one of the world's experts in pandemic virus infections. How are you, Dr. Burke?
Good, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your information and expertise with us. First of all, tell the audience exactly what is the coronavirus and how is it different from other viruses?
The coronavirus is a small germ, a small microbe that is circulated from person to person through respiratory secretions and usually causes a cold or a cough, but in some people can cause a very severe disease of pneumonia and even death. Coronaviruses are common in nature. Humans have 4 different kinds of coronaviruses already, but they're mild diseases. They're benign. They're not like the current coronavirus of this coronavirus 19, COVID-19 is the name for the current disease. But cows have coronaviruses, dogs have coronaviruses, and even bats have coronaviruses.
Now, I'm seeing a report that they thought that in Wuhan, this epidemic may have started with a bat. Is that credible, or is that just fantasy?
That's the reason I mentioned the bats. It's more than credible. There's good scientific evidence that this virus has jumped species from bats into humans. And the question is whether or not it jumped directly. And by jumped, I mean that somehow a human came in contact with the bat virus. But more likely is that the bat virus infected some other animal that was a human food, and then people ate the animals and butchered the animals and ate the animals. So it's a bat virus that may have had a side stop for a while in another animal species before it made it into humans. And then when it got into humans, it started to spread rapidly.
Well, I know you have demonstrated in the past, I remember one of your lectures, where you demonstrated how a virus like this spreads and how rapidly. And can you just explain to the audience in ways that they could understand how this can happen and can spread so fast from a city in China to all over the world?
So any infectious disease that spreads from person to person, there are 2 ways to put numbers on how fast that goes. The first way is called the reproductive number of the epidemic. That is, how many people one person subsequently infects. So if each person infects 2 other people, then the progression goes 1 person, 2, 4, 8, 16. It's just like a nuclear explosion in that it goes by twofold multiplied over and over. If the reproductive number is 3, then the rate goes even faster, goes 3, 9, 27, etc. So the first thing we do is we measure how many people are infected by each person on average, the reproductive number. And that number for this current virus, the COVID-19 virus, is probably around 3. The second thing is how fast it takes each of these steps to occur. And it looks like the average on that is around 5 or 6 days, maybe longer in some cases, maybe shorter. So what's happening is this is going like a chain reaction explosion with the number amplifying every 5 or 6 days by this factor of about 3-fold. And in a matter of a month or 2, you get up to big numbers really fast.
Wow. And I guess if you saw this happening on a map, it would be a very clear indication of how it can grow. But it seems to have been faster in places like Italy. Is there a reason why they would have more of it than, say, Spain or India?
Yeah, although right now Italy has the most. Most of the countries in Europe have at least 1,000 cases. Italy tops all of the countries, but it looks like the other countries aren't that far behind. So Italy has around 10,000 cases, and Spain and Germany and France and all have 1,000 or thereabout cases. It'll just take them another 2 weeks to catch up to Italy. I don't have a good reason as to what there is special about those countries. That a large part of this is just by chance about when it got introduced, because when you've got something that's amplifying threefold every 6 days, after less than a few weeks, you have 10 times as many cases or more than that. So if it just got into Italy just a week or two earlier than some of these other countries, that could be enough to explain a tenfold difference in Italy compared to the other countries.
Well, now, can we trust China's numbers? In the past, we have experiences with China not reporting bad news, and they certainly tried to keep this coronavirus sort of under the table for the first few weeks. Can we trust their numbers now? Or I understand that they're putting out information that they're starting to see the virus not be quite as bad or is retreating a little bit. Can we trust those numbers?
I think we can. A couple of weeks ago, the U.S. sent a commission there, part of a WHO team, and the people who were on that reviewed the reporting and the data and came to the conclusion that it was pretty useful, pretty trustworthy. That, as you point out, when the SARS epidemic first occurred now almost 17 years ago, at that time, China was terrible. They didn't say anything. They kept all the numbers secret, didn't even admit that they had an epidemic till it was totally out of control. This time in Wuhan, the local health officials buried the story for a while. But after that, the country did open up. And I have to say, I think that the efforts made by the Chinese government really did slow the epidemic. They put in this drastic control of movement. They locked down people from traveling from city to city. There was a complete absence of people on the streets. And as a consequence, the infection rate dropped dramatically. I think those are true numbers, and there are lessons in that for us. I'm worried that
I'm afraid the lesson is that if you're in a totalitarian country, you can lock it down. But, exactly telling people in the United States to control their travel and events and getting together and going to sporting events and things is a lot more difficult than it would be the Chinese saying, you do this or we're going to come and send you to Siberia.
Yeah, that was exactly the message that I was going to give, that to control it this way, it requires these draconian interventions, and that we're going to have a hard time. We won't be able to do that in the United States. We'll be able to have a quarantine. We'll be able to have people voluntarily not participate in events and to stay home more. And so we can slow it, but we won't be able to put the clamps on it like, as you say, totalitarian states.
Well, also the fact that it started in Wuhan, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, how could it start in a little town in China? Wuhan is not a little town. Wuhan is 11 billion people, and it's a huge, huge city.
Yeah, I've been to Wuhan, and I've been to the university there, and it is, as you say, it's a big metropolitan city. It's one of the large, I think it's the fifth largest city in China, and they have some pretty big cities in China.
Well, when it's been reported that we have 1,000 cases right now in the United States, does that mean that in another week we will have 3,000? If it is progressing?
If it progresses as expected, that's right. But it's even more concerning than that, is that the 1,000 that we have are the ones that we know and have been diagnosed and are counted. But the best estimates are that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg so far. The people that are being suspected cases and are being tested are those with the most severe symptoms. And the people who have relatively mild disease or have a cold and a cough but don't have pneumonia. There are probably many more of those cases for every person who gets pneumonia and gets really sick. So I and most other people who are paying attention to the numbers think that the actual numbers are substantially higher than 1,000.
So we have to expect that it will come to western Pennsylvania. I think there was a case reported in Philadelphia, but we've had nothing reported, as far as I know, to date in Allegheny County. But there could be people that have been infected that are in the county that have not yet been tested and not yet been determined that they have it.
That's right. I fully expect it to spread in Allegheny County. And I think that there probably are people right now who are either early in symptoms or mild symptoms who've not yet been diagnosed, who are already here and potentially spreading the disease. There's an awful lot of transmission going on that we just haven't caught up with yet.
Well, now, if you were an events planner and you were planning an event, let's say for the first week of April, and you were expecting a couple of hundred people, if it was you and knowing what you know, would you cancel that event now or wait and see what happens?
It's getting close to saying that I'd cancel it now. I was planning to go to Seattle next week, and we knew 3 weeks ago that we had to cancel that one just on the first number of cases. But we're getting to the point now where any kind of large gathering in April or May in the United States probably ought to be canceled or modified or turn into a virtual meeting or
postponed.
Find some other way or postponed. Yeah. So and then we'll have to decide how long we do that. If it's just for the next month or two, or whether that's going to have to. We're going to have to keep doing this for a longer period of time.
Well, now they're working on a vaccine, and I guess all the reports are that it could be probably this coming fall or even later before we would actually have a vaccine. Plus, once this abates and the coronavirus is under control, can we expect it to break out again next flu season?
I think that there's a very high chance that what will happen is that we'll have a spike in this spring, April, May, and most coronaviruses, the ones that we have that you and I get and that are mostly childhood diseases, they tend to be strongly wintertime disease, just like influenza. And so smart money says that this virus, COVID-19, will probably also be predominantly a wintertime transmitted disease, and by winter I mean extending into the spring, but that it'll decline during the summertime. If we're very lucky, it'll go away. I think that's very unlikely given the extent of transmission worldwide already. My prediction is that we will see this come back in the fall, probably even worse than it was in the spring. And so anything that we are doing now, we need to be prepared to either continue to do throughout the summer or to re-implement those controls in the fall.
Well, if we do get a vaccine later on this year, let's say by October, November or something, won't that help a great deal if everyone can be inoculated?
If that could be done, yes, but I've worked on vaccines most of my career, and even if you had a vaccine today that was made, you'd still have to test it in humans for its safety. You'd have to test it for its ability to block infection. And in this kind of virus disease, particularly when the young people are not terribly affected by it, it's mostly old folks that get severe illness or die from it, you'd want to make sure it was carefully safety tested if you were going to give it to populations who weren't getting that sick in the first place, to make sure there weren't side effects or complications. So it's going to take months for the vaccine to be made. It'll take months for it to be scaled up in manufacturing, and then it'll take months for it to be safety tested and efficacy tested. I don't think that there's a realistic prospect that it'll be available for this coming season of next fall or next winter. Maybe if everything goes right, it'll be available in a year or a year and a half.
Wow. Well, now let me ask you a question. Is it possible that this virus, you could have a vaccine, but that the virus mutates and comes back, but in a different form that makes the vaccine or the inoculation ineffective?
So that's exactly what happens in influenza, is that we have vaccines that generally work pretty well. They're not perfect vaccines, but they typically protect most of the people that get it. But one of the problems is the virus mutates every year, and so you're trying to prepare a vaccine in advance that's mutating, and there's a mixture of scientific forecasting and guesswork that goes into deciding what that next strain is going to look like and how to compose the vaccine. But in flu, it's a common problem, and it could turn out to be a problem for the coronaviruses as well. We don't have any coronavirus vaccines now because up to this point, the coronaviruses have been relatively mild diseases. But if we have one for this COVID-19, there's a reasonable chance it could mutate around. There are a couple of genetic variants already. If you do the gene sequencing of the virus, there are some different minor variants. They don't look like they will present a problem for vaccines, but they're going to continue to evolve in their own direction. So that could be a problem. I wouldn't put it as a first-order problem right now. Just getting the vaccine will be a problem enough.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for being with us today and telling us about this. We're going to bring on another guest in a few minutes that will talk about what the individuals can do and how you can protect yourself and the steps that you should be taking now. But you've been listening to Dr. Donald Burke, who is an expert in infectious diseases and has been all over the world and has written many papers and I guess you would have to consider, he probably is in the United States, you would have to be one of the top experts and most knowledgeable people that we have in the country. And it's been an honor to have you with us, Donald.
And likewise, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and your guest.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much, Doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back in just a few moments, and we'll have more of the best of Allegheny County.
Honey, I'm so excited. I found the perfect solution for us and your parents.
Really?
It's St. Barnabas. For us, they have the Woodlands, a beautiful carriage home community.
Very interesting.
And for your parents, there's the Village. It has an indoor mall with shops, a place to do their banking, and great restaurants.
Plus, we can relax knowing they're safe and secure.
St. Barnabas has everything we're looking for.
Great. Let's schedule a tour.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Roddey for St. Barnabas, and this is the best of Allegheny County, and we're talking today about the coronavirus. And you just heard from Dr. Donald Burke, the epidemiologist from the University of Pittsburgh, distinguished professor, former dean of the School of Public Health, an expert, a world expert on the coronavirus. And he certainly gave a great description of what it is and how it mutates and how it spreads across the country. We're now going to talk to a good friend of ours. He was on our show a few weeks ago talking about the benefits of drinking red wine. And I could not agree more, but today he's going to talk about some very common sense, practical things that you can do when the coronavirus becomes a problem in Allegheny County. And we have to plan for that as almost inevitably that we're going to have a lot of cases here and what we should do to protect ourselves. Jeff is a physician's assistant, and he is an expert in a lot of fields because he is a person that's had to study medicine and work with some very fine doctors, and he has a rich background in the medical field. Welcome, Jeff, and thanks for coming back on our show.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here. And it seems like 2 years ago we talked about wine with all the recent news, but that was a lot of fun, and I always enjoy speaking to you.
Well, that was a lot better topic than talking about a virus, but it's coming and we need to be prepared. So first of all, tell us a little about your background, and then tell us some practical things that we should do and we should know about how to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, Jim, I'm a physician assistant, but today I'd like not to wear the medical hat as much as the human hat. One of my jobs has been over the years is to communicate complex medical information into ways that people that don't have that background can understand it. And really, I think that's something that we really need today is we're getting a lot of news. Dr. Burke obviously has a lot of facts and figures which are very important for us to know. However, oftentimes our emotion tends to overwhelm what we're hearing. We often in the medical field say when we talk to someone, they only hear about or understand about 10% of what is said. So it can be a daunting task to convert all the news that's out there and really make it understandable. So that's the things that I want to talk about today is trying to put the human side to it, what people are thinking, what people are knowing, and really to give them some control and power back rather than just sort of be taking it away and saying, you know, this wave is coming and we better get out of the way, so to speak.
Well, why don't you tell us, first of all, what people should do to prepare? Are there things about that you should buy and have on hand so you don't have to go out shopping? Where do you begin?
Right. Where do you begin with this? It's almost an all-encompassing subject. But one of the things that I'd like to talk about is habits and how we develop habits and things we can do to keep ourselves protected. And one of the biggest things which Dr. Burke and others I'm sure have talked about is that this is a virus spread human to human. So when you look at the other person across from you in the eyes, you're looking at someone who potentially could harbor or be susceptible to the virus. So the question is, how do we humans, with the 7 or 8 billions of us, our distance and protect ourselves from one another? And so starting with that as a foundation, trying to think about this as a human-to-human contact issue, then we want to ask ourselves, well, how does the virus get into the human? And really, for the virus to operate, it has to get into our respiratory tract, which is basically our lungs and our airways, either through the mouth or the nose. So how do we protect those areas, and what habits can we develop to try to prevent that? And I like to use the analogy here of, every year, about 1 million plus people cross the street in downtown Pittsburgh. And fortunately, very few of them get hit by a car. You know why that is, Jim?
Sure, because we were taught from the time we were children that you stop and look both ways.
Exactly. And that's the downside, of course, is if you don't stop and look both ways, you can get hit by a car. And that's pretty profound. No one wants to experience getting hit by a car. Certainly no driver wants to hit anybody. So what we do is we always look both ways and prevent literally millions of accidents every year just in Pittsburgh alone. So that's the idea of how we change or develop a habit. We have a goal in mind, something that we want to achieve by it. And there's also the old carrot and the stick. The stick is if we don't adhere to it, we're going to have problems. So the biggest thing we can do for ourselves, again, to give control back to ourselves, is to wash our hands. Well, most people, again, learned early on that washing your hands is one of the most important things to do to prevent spread of disease. Well, now it takes it to a whole new level. We know that if we touch our hands into something that's contaminated with the coronavirus and then subsequently put it in our mouth or nose, there's a very good possibility that we could subsequently infect ourselves. So washing of our hands, how do we remember every time to do that? And that's some of the things that I think we need to just stop and think about, not necessarily thinking about the statistics and when the corona or if the coronavirus is going to be here, but thinking about how can I change my habit to make it automatic, just like crossing the street and looking both ways.
Would you recommend that people try to buy a mask so that when they do have to go outside, that they wear a mask? Is that helpful? I've seen a lot of that on television.
Right, and you're going to get both sides of the story to that. The idea, again, is to prevent contact of the virus into your mucous membranes, in your nose or mouth, or into your pulmonary tract. Breathing in through a mask is not going to block a virus. It just isn't small enough. The fibers are not small enough to block out a virus. However, what a mask can do is if you're someone who was always touching their face, and as a matter of fact, a study came out recently that looked at college students in a classroom, and they did an analysis with video, and they found on average every minute of a 60-hour class, a student touched their face. So we touch our faces generally about every minute. And that's concerning as far as bringing that virus into our face. So if we have a mask, the thought would be that it could act as a potential buffer or border for us getting the virus into our face through our own hands. But again, how can we remember to wash our hands and do some of the things that really should be habits? And I think some of the things that I've read and have looked at, even signage like a Post-it note on your door as you enter your house saying, wash your hands. Have it above a sink. Have it near a bathroom. Really changing habits to washing hands. Washing hands is more effective than using the alcohol wipes or alcohol-based ointments as far as cleaning your hands. It can actually do a much better job and is more effective. So washing your hands as a habit is something we can start today, all of us.
Well, in addition to those personal habits, it's good to avoid crowds. It's good to avoid any place that there's a gathering of people. People want to stay at home a lot more. You don't want to be going out as much. How much change do we need to make in our lifestyle? Going to be quarantined, or do we know?
Well, here's the thing, Jim. When I come up to you over the years, what's the one thing I always do?
Shake hands.
Shake your hands. That's a habit which in different times is certainly a great thing to do. It's a greeting. We all want to feel the human touch. It's an affirmation of who we are and who you are. But touching, hugging, all those things with human contact are things we should really avoid. The alternative, some people would say, would be an elbow bump, or actually some of the kids now are using foot taps as a way of greeting. But what happens when we're with other humans? And I think that's basically what your question is. Do we want to be in crowds where either touching someone, touching something that another person has touched, for example, a doorknob, a elevator button, or actually having someone cough or sneeze on you can make you susceptible to the virus? And I think what we're going to find here very shortly is probably what, as Dr. Burke predicted, is that we are not going to want to be in crowds because of that reason. It's going to be too difficult to separate ourselves.
And if you do have to see someone or have be in someone else's company, just say, hello, how are you, and keep 6 feet away.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's 6 feet, 10 feet, 3 feet. The point is we have to have our radar up. If someone's coughing, we shouldn't be near them and they shouldn't be near us. This is a two-way street when we talk about the coronavirus. It's people being responsible to other people. And as someone who may not have it, you've got to be out there with your radar. But someone who does have a cold or a cough, if it's coronavirus or not, they have to respect their surroundings.
Stay home.
Yeah, and it really comes down to that. How can we respect each other and not spread this? It's about people, again, that making decisions, doing the right thing that are going to really change the spread of this. People that are susceptible, the older, the people with pulmonary issues, those people need to be especially careful about how they're going to be around people. So these are things, someone 20, 30 and are very healthy, they can certainly get it. The likelihood of the serious complications thus far haven't been quite as serious as if you're older or have underlying pulmonary or other conditions.
Well, when you say older people, that's certainly, I resemble that remark, so I'm going to do everything that you recommended and pass the word on to all my old friends. Jeff,
that's why the radio is such a great venue.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and telling about a very practical and common sense things to do. And if we do have an outbreak and if we do all are quarantined, maybe we'll get you back on the radio and we can talk more about things you can do to make yourself comfortable and recover. You've been listening to Jeff Bost, who is our guest today. And ladies and gentlemen, be sure to tune in again at 9 o'clock on Saturdays and noon on Sundays. And we'll be back, sponsored by St. Barnabas.